Why? Grid,
We're good?
then we're okay.
Okay, perfect. All right. Thank you. Okay, so we are posted hybrid, so we can begin.
Recording in
calling to
progress.
Order the March 27th, 2024 special committee of the special meeting of the Newton School Committee. We have 3 members joining us virtually this evening. And given this is a special meeting, we will not have public comment tonight. To start with, we do have a consent agenda with 4 items. Meeting minutes from the March 25th regular meeting. A transfer request for funds from the Scoville Trust. Revisions to policy JKAA, which is the restraint policy, and grant awards. Is there anything a member would like to remove from the consent agenda for further discussion? Nope. Okay. So seeing nothing, we can take a roll call vote on the consent agenda. Ward 1 is going to be joining us late. Ward 2 is yes. Ward
Can I
3
move approval of
Yes.
this?
I'm sorry, Paul?
Can I move approval of the consent agenda?
Oh, geez, I'm sorry. Yes, thank you. A motion to approve the consent agenda. Thank you.
I'm second.
Second. Got ahead of myself. Again. All right. Any further discussion on that motion? All right, now we will take a roll call vote. Ward 1 is absent. Ward 2 is yes. Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 4?
Yes.
Ward 5?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes.
Ward 8?
Yes.
And Mayor Fuller just stepped out of the room, but that is 7-0 with 2 absent. So that motion on the passing the consent agenda passes. Moving to budget review for this evening, we have instructional technology and non-instructional, which includes human resources, transportation, fees, and operating budget. So looks like Stephen Rattendi will be starting with the instructional technology and library services piece.
Poor Steve has to run the meeting and do it tonight. It's a lot.
Multitasking.
He's
Multitasking.
very talented.
4-core processor right here.
Mhm.
Good evening, everyone. Yeah, I needed a nerd joke in there somewhere along the line,
That's
right?
good. That was a good IT joke.
Good evening, everyone. I will be talking about information technology and library services and the budget and its impact on us this year. The very first slide up here is one that you already saw in Anna's presentation. So I'm going to actually just go into more depth in the slides that follow. So I'm not going to go over this slide specifically. Very first, I wanted to start with just a sort of overview of sort of big event that started this week that we are intimately involved with as the Information Technology Department, and that is MCAS. MCAS started across the state on Monday. And Tuesday, with Monday, mostly elementary schools in the district. And then on Tuesday and Wednesday today, the high schools did ELA testing. So that's high stakes testing at grade 10. And that's all digital, right? The entire assessment is digital now, which means that we play a big role in making sure that assessment goes smoothly. And I'm proud to say that there were no issues from the technology standpoint with MCAS, right? So this involves preparing devices, making sure they're updated, making sure that the correct software is installed and updated to run the test, making sure that our network is able to handle the traffic that it needs to handle and is stable during MCAS testing. And making sure the students are familiar with the testing environment, because all of those things together make for a less stressful environment so that the students can actually show their understanding to the best of their ability. And that's just, to me, that's an indicator of where our department fits in with a lot of operations in the district, right? Both from the instructional side and from the operational side. And so that's what this slide sort of indicates, is that we do have sort of two roles in our department, both the instructional side and the operational supporting side of all district operations. On the instructional side, we include the library teachers in our department. So at the elementary school, library teachers meet every week with students, actually with every student every week in library classes. And the instructional technology specialists, which there are approximately just over 9 of in the district, they support our teachers. They are instructional coaches working with teachers on a daily basis to help bring technology into the classroom. As often as they can, they like to push in and co-teach with teachers where they can and whenever they're invited to do so. On the more operational side, we have the tech solutions and services team, which include our frontline support for end users, our network media team, which supports our network infrastructure, making sure that everything's working properly on the network side, as well as our classroom technology like projectors in our buildings, and the phone system as well falls under that team. The database management team is really involved with our all of the databases that we have to maintain, our student information system and how that talks to various other software to make it really seamless when we move from one piece of software to another, where students get rostered, classes can just be pulled right up in all of those various software pieces. And as you can see on the side is just an indication of some of the things that we support throughout the district. A couple of budget additions that we are seeing this year. This is probably the most significant is on the software side. And these are 2 pieces of software which we actually do have in place this year. Parent Square is in place as a pilot this year. We'll be expanding it next year. And then Thought Exchange was also a piece of software that was purchased this year, but will see itself included in the IT line item for next year, which it was in, I believe, the superintendent's line item this year. On the Parent Square side, I did want to, we just started this pilot, I would probably say about a month or so ago. It was a little bit delayed with the strike, just because we did not want to roll it out while there were a lot of things going on in the district around that. So it's really been only in place for a little while. I did pull up some quick statistics just to show you we really are in our infancy. This is hard to see here. I added this slide just recently, but here's our three of our schools, or actually these are our 4 schools that are involved in the pilot, as well as we're doing district-wide communication, but Newton North, Bigelow, Bowen, and Ainger. So it's really kind of early to see where we are in using it. You can see our biggest user is one of our best communicators in the district, Amy Winston from Newton North High School. She is putting it through its tests. She's testing the system quite well for us. There's a lot of setup that's involved, making sure that the data integrations work well, making sure all the parents are in there correctly, all the students are in there correctly, and just a learning curve in terms of learning the system, which is why we did a soft rollout this year, just starting small to prepare us for moving bigger next year.
Just so the public know, as an FYI, this is not in the slide deck because the questions from school committee came prior to the meeting and we try to answer them right here. So this was one of the questions that came from the school committee.
So it's just added in there. And again, just indicating that we're sort of really just starting off with this. And so we don't have a really good sense of how it's affecting communication in a district-wide sense yet. But the benefits here of the system long-term are quite high, just from being able to keep all communication in sort of one place. And the sort of big benefit from Parent Square over School Messenger, which is our current messaging platform, is that it pulls teachers in to the mix, which in School Messenger, we really only use it for district-wide and school-wide communication, not on the individual teacher lesson level. And in the future, teachers will also be able to communicate through Parent Square, providing sort of more of that one-stop shopping for communication with families. So that's one piece of software that's being added. And the other one is Thought Exchange, which our superintendent has been using quite well this year to increase community engagement and sort of gauge community understanding. And I don't know if you want to say a little bit about where we are with that.
So we've used this quite a bit to crowdsource information for the entry planning process. So if folks would like a reminder of how that was used, there's a whole AI section and Thought Exchange themes in the entry plan. In addition, there's a new chatbot feature that uses adaptive interviewing, which we've tested with our social workers, asking them questions about their working conditions. And we also just sent out a chatbot, as I mentioned, to all of our private school families to see why did they go to private school? Is there anything we can learn from their experience? We've had a couple glitches, as you have with AI, that it's sort of scolded one of the respondents saying the thing you said wasn't nice or something like that. So I have put in a ticket to Thought Exchange. They've been very responsive back and forth about that to try to figure out what that is. That said, this is a deeply helpful tool for me as a superintendent to really harder to reach groups. It also now is enhanced with survey capacities. I'll be coming to you shortly to review with you for next year, what are the surveys that we'd like to ask our community on a more regular basis so that we can start to track our progress in terms of building culture and community. This will be a big tool for us to use to continue to do that. Should we be going out in the future for operational override, this is a tool that is used nationally for that reason. And I'll be actually presenting with Thought Exchange at the Mass Superintendents Association this summer to think about all the ways that this tool can be used across the state to leverage advocacy for education.
Couple of other additions. If I can get the slide deck to actually go. There we go. One more. There we go. A couple of other additions to the IT budget. We put in an increase for staff device replacements. We have a large number of devices for staff that need to be replaced next year. So that's an extra $60,000 to support that. And then we restored $10,000 that was cut in the previous year's budget that supported some summer stipends for the IT department to help prepare for the next school year. Sometimes we hire an intern, like a student intern, either a college intern or sometimes even a high school intern to work with us and help us. And then restoration of in-state conference funding. So this supports some professional development of the IT department. I also wanted to put in here some information about grants that we do make use of to support our work. This year, as you may recall, we participated in the Massachusetts Municipal Cybersecurity Awareness Training Program. And this provided training to all of our staff on cybersecurity awareness, things like phishing campaigns. And it was a robust platform for us to do that. And it was a free state program. We are going to continue that next year. Probably on a little bit of a smaller scale. We probably won't do our entire faculty in the same way just because of the amount of time that takes up. But we will target some of our newer teachers next year, our new staff next year, as well as staff that didn't complete it this year for various reasons. For example, they were on leave and other things. Next year, the state's also offering an opportunity to actually have a more robust option for educators where they can also earn 10 PDPs. So we'll offer that as an optional offering for staff to be able to count as PDPs towards their recertification. We also participated in an IBM cybersecurity grant this year. That was, again, neither of these two provided direct funds for us, but they provided services. So the IBM cybersecurity grant had us working alongside some experts in cybersecurity from IBM. And in particular, we worked with them on creating cyber incident response plans and playbooks should we have a cyber incident. So we made use of their expertise to help us build out those materials. Next year, like I said, we plan on participating in the awareness training program again, and we have applied for funds from a new opportunity offered by the state, which is a municipal local cybersecurity grant program. They support sort of 5 different things under this round of the grant. We would qualify for 2 of them if we get it. We haven't just applied for it. We don't know. We'll know, I think, in May or June whether we actually get that funding. But it's to support further rollout of multi-factor authentication in the district, and potentially and to do what's the word I want? A tabletop exercise in cybersecurity. So what I put in for was to hire a consultant to come and run us through a tabletop exercise of a cybersecurity incident and see and actually plan with our plan, right? Like, so use our plan, see how well it works. What do we need to adjust? Make sure our folks are up to speed on how to deal with an incident should it happen. Another piece, this is not directly in the IT budget, but I added it here because it is a part of what we do in terms of supporting software that helps our district. This year, we started using Panorama through Student Services for SEL measurement and screening. And so we hope we will use that again next year through a grant program. Sort of interesting to keep this on here just because in the future, when and if grants run out, we will need to absorb that into our budget at some point in time. So one reason to mention that here.
There were a couple questions from the school committee about who sees the Panorama surveys, et cetera. You're actually going to get a whole presentation on this later in the spring. So you can actually see the data. We'll include it in our annual report this year, the trends that we're seeing. In addition, we want to show you the student surveys and the family surveys. So the idea here is Panorama allows us with nationally normed data for students to take a self-assessment, which we did this year for our littlest people, grades 3 to 5. We did Sown to Grow in grades 6 to 8. And the Panorama survey has a parent component that allows parents to say what their experience has been like and how their students are. And then there's a teacher version. So in theory, you get some really nice triangulated data around young people. What are parents seeing, teachers seeing, and students saying? So I've found it to be helpful, especially with the national norming, and it gives us some real direction about how to think about our students' mental health and SEL curriculum.
And the last piece I put on here just as an informational, it's another part component of what we do. Our elementary technology specialists have been working to develop, along with our SEL coaches, some work around digital citizenship at our elementary schools. And they've piloting this year, again, started within the last month, some nice little discussion cards. They're all bound on a nice ring that an elementary teacher can quickly and easily pull up in class and engage in a conversation with the kids around different issues around digital citizenship. We're hoping to expand that next year, and we have applied for Newton School Foundation funding to fund essentially the production of those cards through the Newton North program. We are planning on coming back and showcasing that at a future meeting. I think at the end of April is what we're aiming for at school committee.
You're going to be instructional technologied by Steve that night with his team showing you. We've had a lot of parent questions about media literacy and digital literacy, and Steve and his team would like you to see what they do so you can speak about that with families.
And then we are always looking for places to seek efficiencies in the department. You may remember last year, and I didn't put this up here, that we did start offering or at least we opened up the BYOD option for grades 11 and 12 at our high school level last year. By survey of students, I would say it looked like we would probably have about 50% of the student body take us up on that, if not a little bit more. I would say in the end, what we ended up with was about 25% of juniors and 10% and 20% of seniors. So I think probably the parents had a slightly different idea than the students in terms of what they would be accepting in terms of bringing a device to school. So that changed just a little bit, but we have about 25% of our juniors and 20% of our seniors bringing their own device into the district, or at least not taking our device. There may be other students that actually are bringing their own device to the district and have our device. That works out in different ways. I would like to see if we can keep growing that in the future because it is potentially a cost savings for us if we don't have to provide a device to every student in the one-to-one program. It brings other challenges just in terms of managing a wide variety of devices in the building, but it does have that cost savings. And for older students, I kind of like the idea of also transitioning them to their own device because in college they're going to have to be using their device as well on their own because they won't have ours. We're also past the MCAS season, so they don't need our device for testing, which also is a big plus. And I think we had a question around MCAS in particular and our devices versus using other devices. Some of the school districts that do BYOD will specify a device that kids need to bring to the high school, and then they still manage them. So for example, they may say, use Chromebooks, but we're going to put it on our management system. That gets a little tricky, and I'm not sure I'm quite willing to do that yet. I like the model of where up until grade 10, we are providing a device. It's easy for managing MCAS. It's also easy for managing things like filtering, web filtering, both in home and at school. We're not quite, I don't think we'd expand yet beyond grade 11 and 12 on that one. The other places where we've sought some efficiencies this year or moving into next year's budget is we currently have 4 internet service providers that provides good redundancy for us. If one fails, we have others at backup. But the reality is we have never had to go down to just one provider. So we are looking to cut that back to 3 providers. What that will actually do, there's actually some cost savings there because we will actually increase our bandwidth for less money. It's a good idea to do. We don't need all 4. They can act as backups for each other and give us the sufficient coverage we need in the district. We are also currently piloting in grade 2 using touchscreen Chromebooks versus iPads. So we have all the second grade teachers at Countryside now have Chromebooks and iPads, and they're sort of using the Chromebooks right now to see how well it will work as a touchscreen device for our younger students, at least in grade 2. And so that potentially is a cost savings if you want to compare a Chromebook is $200 to $250 and an iPad is $400 to $500, right? So you get essentially 2 devices for every iPad, 2 Chromebooks for every iPad. So we'll see if that works out. Chromebooks, I would also say, are significantly easier to manage than an iPad is. So there's some savings on the workload side as well.
And the keyboard for writing, critical.
Yearly challenges that we have, and there are quite a few. Every year we see increases in software. This year we saw anything from 0% to 12% increases in the cost of software. Normally we're seeing around 3 to 5%. Sometimes the exception is to 12%. If we're lucky, it's 0%. If we have multi-year contracts, sometimes we can get it down to 0%. But that is a reality that we do face. And if we don't have our budget increasing sufficiently to meet up for that, we're either decreasing the number of licenses or cutting software packages along the way. Student device repair cost is another big factor. And I put up here a number of what we have spent year to date, which is about $142,000. Not all of that is directly out of our budget. And what I'm going to say about that is because we do actually charge fees for accidental damages. And we also have parents opt into an optional repair fund for $25. That's at a middle and high school level where they take the devices home. And that would cover all damages throughout the year. We also only charge for accidental damages, right? Like cracked screens. So some of that includes mechanical, which we would have to take on ourselves and pay. We pay for that piece of it. Majority of this, I would say, are cracked screens. Majority of it is at the middle school level. That's the hardest place to seem to crack the nut of trying to keep devices well cared for, let's say. But we're working on it. We have done insurance models in the past, and the in-house repair fund just seemed like a natural transition. Dealing with the insurance company was just another layer on top of that. But I would say, like, the student device repair cost, there's $1 attached to this. There's also a manpower attached to this, right? So that's the other side of this, is actually dealing with all those devices that come in. We had a question about whether or not we have tried. We do contract out those services, by the way. We do contract with a company, and we send those repairs out. We don't have the manpower, at least in the IT department, to deal with it, and we have not yet started a student sort of repair process. I have talked every now and then with our CTE program about getting one going, because that would be a natural place, but we don't yet have a computer repair program in place there. And I know other schools have been able to make this work in other places. We just haven't been able to get it off the ground in terms of managing that, because it does require a little bit of effort to get it going. Overall, we have taken cuts in staffing over the last 4 years. So we do have fewer staff doing a lot more. So that is always an ongoing challenge. But the biggest challenge is probably what's on the next slide. And that's what I call my $700,000 challenge. And this is really about aging equipment. And so for many years in this department, we rely on one-time funds, surpluses at the end of the year whenever they're available, to be able to fill in gaps in our funding for infrastructure and maintaining that infrastructure. That's uncomfortable, because you never know what you're going to get and when you're going to get it. And so it makes me very nervous. It makes my network team very nervous, because there are things that we would like to replace sooner rather than later. It makes our superintendent very nervous. But we can't do it because we're not sure when we're going to get it. So I gave you some images here of the age of equipment. So the very first top graph, and I know this is small to see at home, but you really just need to see the trends here, and the red line. The red line, everything to the left of that is under 10 years old. Everything to the right of that is over 10 years old. So just to give you a sense, of classroom projectors, we have a lot of classroom projectors that are over 10 years old. What would we like to be doing is replacing those every 6 to 8 years. We are nowhere near being able to do that. And as you can see from the rest of what's younger than 10 years, they're coming quickly up, and they're going to be 10 years old very soon. Network equipment age, again, we have this huge chunk of equipment that just passed the 10-year mark. And we have other equipment that's going to be fast approaching that. We often talk about the new buildings in our district, but I wanted to remind everyone that Newton South High School Newton North High School opened 14 years ago. Actually, the renovations to Newton South were like almost 20 years ago, kind of around when I first started teaching. But Newton North is now a 14-year-old building. Ainger is now 8 years old. Zervis is now 6 years old. At Newton North, we are replacing projectors as they break instead of being proactive and replacing them as a whole. Our network, we did manage to replace our wireless network at the high schools. We actually did that during the pandemic. We were going to use ESSER funds, but we ended up using funds that the city gave us through ARPA at the time. So that was very helpful, because we have made progress there. But I would say that we didn't replace all the network at the high school. We replaced the wireless network. We still have a lot of aging switches on the back end that we are also worried about and need to deal with at some point in time in the future. On the next slide is just an indicator of some of our devices. So the very top image is, and again, this is hard to see, but the very first blue bar there is June 25. This is when we would like to be able to replace approximately 3,000 Chromebooks, right? And so that's June of next year. Google has given us a little bit of a reprieve. Those devices were going to expire in June of 25, meaning we couldn't update them, which means we wouldn't be able to use them for MCAS. Google has now given a lifespan of a device of 10 years, which is probably longer than the device will last, but we will be able to update it for all 10 years. It's not going to last us that long. Batteries are going to die. They're going to be old. They're not going to be running things as well as we would like them to be. We have a few more years on this. I don't want to push this much longer, especially considering the year after. We have another 5,000 devices that are going to be at a place where they would have expired under Google's original timeline. We want to be able to replace a certain number of devices every year so that we don't have these bumps. And that really is my goal. We are closer to that goal with last year's budget, but we're not quite there yet. On the bottom is the staff replacement devices, and you can see in FY25, that's where this big yellow line here is on FY25. That is our round of teacher devices that need to be replaced next year. You can see we'll see another big bump in FY27. My hope is to start replacing some of that FY27 bump in FY28, so we start leveling the number of devices we have to replace overall. I put these here just as an indicator of the challenges that we have in the district in terms of dealing with our infrastructure and our technology that we're using in the classroom on a daily basis. So that is a real challenge that we do need to address in future budgets.
Steve,
Gonna
could
go-
you speak
yes.
a little bit about the question that was asked to us about leasing versus buying? and
Yeah,
How
so
you think about that?
It's an interesting question. So I looked at the numbers last year and leasing helps you in year one, maybe year two, maybe year three. But once you get to year four, the amount you're paying on leases, because you now have 4 years of accumulated leases, is the same amount it would take just to buy out the devices outright in that year. So if you think about replacing 1,000 devices every year, the very first year, you're going to have a lease for 1,000 devices. You're still going to be using those devices for 4 years. You potentially have a 4-year lease on those devices. The next year you buy another 1,000 devices, you now have a second lease that you're carrying at the same time as that first lease for another 4 years. Third year, you now have 3 leases you're carrying. In the fourth year, you're carrying 4 leases. When you look at the total cost in the year 4, that's essentially the same amount it would cost to have just bought 1,000 devices every year individually, right? So it helps you initially in year 1, 2, and 3 to get to year 4, but then you're carrying leases every year that would have just been the same amount as buying 1,000 devices outright. And normally at the end of a lease, you have an option of either like a 1-year buy, like a $1 buyout, in which case you can buy all the devices for $1 or send them back. It's, you know, whichever way you could go either way. But so there's my stand on leases in the end when I think about it from my math backgrounds. I don't understand it. That's essentially what it comes down to, except to get us to the point where we may have a little bit of time to build up our budget. I'm going to take a quick look at some of the questions and see if there's anything I didn't address. I think I addressed most of them beforehand. There is one that I will address, which isn't directly related to the budget here, but I think is an important one to address because it's been an outstanding issue. And then we'll see if there's any other questions. I think the one thing I want to address, I know earlier this year we had a little problem in one of our libraries at the elementary, actually 2 of our libraries at the elementary school. One was affected a little bit more in terms of the books that were in that library. We had a book lice, which does not impact humans. Just making sure everyone remembers that from conversations we've had. Book lice love
Not
humid
lice.
environments. It's not hair lice. Book lice love
Immediately
humid
start itching
environments.
my head.
Yes. Book lice love humid environments and love the glue in book bindings and any of the, like mold that grows on books in human environments. That's what they feed on in human environments. And our elementary schools and our libraries and many of our elementary schools are not air conditioned over the summer. It gets very humid in them. And so they're perfect places for the growth of book lice. We had one library which had a lot of books that just need to potentially that need to be replaced based on what happened there. We've been going through a process just to make sure that we're being really careful about the books we're replacing, to make sure that we're not replacing just old titles because they need to be replaced. We want to make sure that we're being thoughtful about that. And so this week we've got a final list of those books that we want to do. It's about $3,500 to $4,000 to replace the books that we need to do. And so we're going to take care of that out of the school district's budget.
Can you say which school that is so everyone in
Pierce.
the land? So the Pierce School
Pierce
books
Elementary.
will be restored by the end of this school year without lice in them. You don't get the lice back.
And we hope to have some cooling
Yes.
stations in our
So
libraries
I
to support
mentioned
that.
to you that we are testing cooling stations in some of our hotter elementary schools that don't have plans for redo or already have. We did an audit, a cooling audit, let's say that. So I just want to say to you that there are a lot of spaces in elementary schools, even the older elementary schools, that have air conditioning, including modular spaces. So it appears that the principals and Mr. Stickney, our facilities director, have come up with increasing library space cooling, which kills 2 birds with 1 stone, or 2 lice with 1 stone, if you will, which we can cool and kill the, sorry, I had to. It'll help us cool the large spaces where teachers and kids can rotate in on those hot days, and we can sort of reduce that exposure for the potential humid lice problem. So we're still exploring that and how we're going to get to it. But we're going to be creative with our own internal end of year capacity to do that. So our finance guys on that right now.
Any other questions?
Gross. I do have questions. One of my questions you halfway answered. I just wanted to clarify. You talked about your instructional technology specialists working, I think you said there were 9 that work across elementaries.
It's about 9.6.
Are there any similar supports that exist at the secondary level?
I'm sorry, the 9.6 are across all buildings,
Across all levels?
including NECP and the Ed Center.
Okay, I might have just conflated that with what you were saying with
Yeah, nope,
librarians.
that's right. I may have
Maybe.
also misspoke. So.
No, I didn't think it was me. I have a question about touch screens, and I heard in your presentation, you noted that the most common breaking problems happen with screens. I'm wondering if what our vision is for touchscreen Chromebooks across grade levels and whether we're going to see some incremental costs there later.
Yeah. So when we started the one-to-one program, we were really specific about putting touchscreen. We started the one-to-one program in the high schools. And when we did that and talking with educators, high school teachers were really interested in having that touchscreen functionality to be able to mark up PDFs, for example, and to have students have that ability to do handwriting on it. And so that's where we had the touchscreens initially. We had moved some of those that had come back from seniors to the middle schools. Touchscreen devices have screens that are significantly more or less durable than non-touchscreen devices. We have actually moved majority of those out of the middle schools because it's not a good idea to put them in middle school hands for the most part. And so they're really just at the high schools. And so we do see some damages of screens at the high schools, but not nearly as much as the middle schools. I think we would potentially look at putting them in some elementary schools in the future, especially for younger grades. Those devices stay in the buildings and don't go home. So the damages tend to be a lot less in elementary schools overall.
My only question.
Any other questions? Anping?
Thank you very much for presentation. And technology is always challenging, and to me probably particularly.
That's always great too.
Say again.
It's always great too.
That's good. Especially my kids, they're really enjoying the technology much more than me. So you mentioned that high school, about 1/4 of students using their own.
In grades 11 and 12.
11, 12. Okay. I'm wondering, is there any incentive for them to use their own devices since we save money, right?
Yeah.
I don't know how much money we save.
Most of the incentive to a high school student is that their own device is usually more powerful than the device we give them.
Okay.
So that is a big incentive for them. And that's probably the biggest incentive overall. We don't force them to turn back in their Chromebook, or we haven't, mostly because we also don't want to stigmatize students who don't have their own device, right? So it's an option for those students. I'm not entirely sure what other benefits we'd be able to give them for their own device besides the fact that their devices are usually full-fledged laptops, right? So they're a MacBook or a PC, whereas a Chromebook is a little more limited in what they can do. We have more controls on the Chromebook, good or bad, right? So a personal device would have whatever protections either the parent puts on the device or the student hasn't found a way to get rid of on the device. But yeah, I mean, I think the biggest incentive for most high school kids is it's my own device. I have full control over that device for the most part, and it is more powerful than the Chromebook that I get from the school.
Oh, probably I do not understand fully. So if they bring their own devices, do they still get whatever the device school provide or not?
If they are bringing their own device, they usually we strongly encourage them to turn in their own device, right? So last year, what we noticed was that many students were bringing their own device, and we had given them our own device as well, right? So they had.
Oh.
So that's why this year we really started offering them that option: turn in your other device and bring your own device. And so we pushed that heavily last year, and we'll push it again this year. But again, they have the device already because we give it to them in grade 9 and they keep it through senior year. So they have to bring it back to us. And so we just have to encourage them to keep doing that if they have their own device that they can use.
So, okay. At first I thought if they bring their own devices, they do not need a school device. But anyway.
And that's true. They actually don't, because most of our software is web-based. So if it's web-based, they can access it from any device. We don't have to install special software on it. So they could. They don't need our device. It's just that they have already been given it in grade 9. And so they have to turn it back in at the end of grade 10 if they want to not use our device and use their own.
Okay. So probably we save a little bit of money of repair. Since they're using old devices, so they probably don't need to repair the school device.
Another benefit to us.
Okay. So not much saving at all.
Well, we also don't have to buy as many devices overall, right? So, so this year we didn't buy any high school devices. We actually were just reusing devices that had already come back to us after many years, and those devices were still good, and they were still good enough to do what they needed to do at the high school level. So there's a potential savings, right?
Okay.
And we really got away with that mostly because when we started the one-to-one program, we started it in grade 10, sort of mid-year, was when it first rolled out. And so the devices that we actually put back into service were not as old as devices as if we had given to them in grade 9. So we had that ability to do that. I'm a little worried when we start getting into the devices that we hand out in grade 9 that now are 4 years old, or now the ones that are currently in grade 9 will be 5 or 6 years old by the time we get them back.
Quickly, you said need about $700,000 added to the base. So that's minimum, or that's nice to have $700,000? Or
That is a pretty realistic number of what we need. I would probably say that over time, that actually would have to still grow because of inflationary pressures. That's actually also leveled out. Like, right, if you look at everything I would love to replace in year 1 of getting that money, it's probably over $1 million. I'm not expecting I'll see $1 million added to my budget. But over time, it averages out to about 700 when you look at sort of like a 10-year plan. We mapped the whole thing out for 10 years, and over time averaged out to about 700,000.
okay.
I did not count inflation into that, so that is a factor that still needs to be put in there.
So from your perspective, $700,000, we do have the money to provide?
No,
or
that's
that-
not coming in yet,
Oh.
right? So just to clarify,
This is
that's not.
aspirational.
Yeah.
Like best
Okay,
case scenario.
That's what I'm wondering.
Right. So just as we did for the principal budgets, sharing with you what Steve would do if he had the capacity to do everything he wanted to do. Within
Plan
reason.
for the next year. No.
Okay, well,
But it helped
Whenever
us,
one-time money.
you know, I mean, as grant proposals come up, like these are the things that are in my brain as we go through the process of, you know, seeking auxiliary funding.
okay, well, thanks.
Other questions? Barry?
Question about the high school students who bring their own devices. Obviously you don't manage it. But do you have the ability through the Wi-Fi to at least manage like websites that they go to?
We do have limited, we have network level filtering, so it does filter things. But because that's across the entire network, you can't get as specific as you get with the Chromebook level filtering. So when we have a Chromebook, there's an actual extension on the Chromebook,
Right.
and you can be a lot more narrow in that filtering. The network level filtering filters out all the things that we need to filter out because of federal regulations, but it doesn't quite get as granular as we could get with the Chromebook filtering.
Right. And you're limited to because teachers need to use that same Wi-Fi.
Teachers need to use it, any visitors, guests,
Right.
things like that, that might need to come in and access various presentations or other.
Things
services.
like gambling, sexual pornography,
That's
those
all
things, all
blocked.
blocked,
That
all
will
of
be
the
blocked by default.
sex,
Okay.
drugs, rock and roll, all that stuff.
And another question. I'm sure this exists. I just don't know. And I assume you've looked into it, but do Google or Apple offer grants or programs where you can apply
So
districts?
yeah, so we already get education pricing from Apple. So they offer districts special education pricing that's cheaper than the consumer pricing. They don't really offer additional grants beyond that. They do offer training and PD that you can often make use of for free. But they don't often do direct grants anymore because every district in the country would be
Right.
looking for it, right? Chromebooks are actually fairly priced, are priced fairly inexpensive already, and the actual margin is small that companies make on Chromebooks. They make more money on the volume than they do on each individual device. And so there's not much of an offering from companies on those because they really don't. Every company, so Google doesn't actually manufacture Chromebooks for the most part itself. They lease well, they don't lease out, but they provide the specs that other companies need to do. And so it's HP, it's Acer, it's Lenovo, it's Dell that are making the Chromebooks. And again, they're serving the market across the educational field. And there's very limited funds directly from them grant-wise.
Okay. And thanks, that was helpful. And I just wanted to say that I love the idea of a computer repair program for kids. I think you could expand it like to networking, I mean, there's a million very translatable skills that they could be learning now. So
Agreed.
I know it's not just as easy as snapping your fingers, but
Yeah.
I love the idea.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. Other questions?
Chris, I have my hand up.
Thanks, Tamika. You're blocked by
In
the
the
closed
captioning.
captioning there on the screen. Can't see it.
All right. Also, it might be good to put down the question screen, Stephen.
Oh, yes, I can do that.
Anywho, thank you so much for running us through your portion of the budget. I had a quick follow-up question about the pilot at Countryside for grade 2 with the touchscreen devices. Given that this year has been atypical, to say the least, in terms of work to rule and contract negotiations, et cetera, are you satisfied with the volume and the kind of the totality of the feedback that you've been able to capture around the pilot?
Well, because of the work to rule issues and the strike, we did not actually start that pilot until about the last month, right? So it was after the strike that we actually got those into teachers' hands. So they've only barely been using them for the last few weeks. So no, I'm not satisfied yet with the amount of feedback we have, although I will say that so far things are looking promising. So we will continue to work with those teachers and receive and get feedback on how well it's working. As Anna mentioned, I think one of the benefits is starting to get kids on a keyboard a lot earlier, because for an iPad, you have to buy an additional keyboard that you could plug into it, whereas the Chromebook comes with a keyboard. And that has a lot of benefits for students across the board, and getting them used to using a trackpad all has benefits. And I would say that teachers have also run into some frustrations with iPads, just in terms of getting it to work well with all of our software updates happening. A lot of things around an iPad that makes life a lot more complicated. But we'll continue to check on that and collect feedback as we go.
So it sounds like you're, and I might be being presumptive here, but is the plan to extend throughout this year, but also into part of next year to, get a full read on this pilot program?
Yes.
Okay, great.
And
Thank
if
you.
we, there's also, if we can expand to a few more classes this year of the pilot, we'll do that as well. I have a couple of feelers out for that, but we haven't quite gotten there yet.
Good, Tamika? Great, thank you.
Can I ask a clarifying question based on Anping's question, if no one else has any?
Yep.
Your current budget line is about 650 for repair and maintenance. Is the pie in the sky an additional 700K or bumped? So it's double.
So
You
that's
really
actually
need double the money that you have
Yeah.
to have a proactive cyclical.
Yeah, and that
system.
repair and maintenance line is a little deceptive because it includes a lot of things. There's an accounting for software maintenance. So actually that also includes some software licensing from year to year. So that's not all going to hardware. In fact, a good portion of it is not going to hardware. It's also going to software maintenance over time.
Big gap.
The 700,000 includes all three of those things. It's the classroom tech, the projectors, the
The additional
network infrastructure,
700,000, yeah.
That we don't have.
Yeah.
Yeah, the additional 700,000 would go towards the classroom technology, which we like projectors, which we currently don't actually have budgeted anywhere to replace except for when they break. For network equipment that needs to be a continual process of repairing and replacing. So those two pieces. I mean, it's not software, but it is.
Yeah.
It is.
It's,
those.
I mean, we're really talking about just a more proactive replacement program as opposed to a just pay as you go.
And pray for
Wait,
free
yeah,
cash or.
When things break, we fix it, and some years are going to be okay, and some years are going to be worse.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
And to be able to, honestly, one of my biggest worries there is the network side of things, because so much relies on that network. And it's also the cybersecurity side of the network piece, right? Like that includes money to replace our firewalls on a regular basis. That includes money to replace switches and servers on a regular basis as well. Backup systems for those servers as well.
Okay, that's helpful, because that was actually going to be my first question, was just, thinking about this of the, under the Thrive budget. I mean, some of these things are not really thriving. They're, arguably, you can
Necessity.
very much get yourself into the kind of penny wise, pound foolish decision making of, we're not doing what we need to do with something like cybersecurity. And so that's a helpful clarification. I appreciate that. And then just as I look at the 9,000 devices for a classroom that, you're saying, realistically should be replaced over the next 2 years. Like what is the actual cost of a Chromebook these days?
So a Chromebook is anywhere from 200 to 250.
200 to
We go out to
okay.
bid for them whenever we do it. So it ends up being
That's-
the lowest bid we can get.
That number there then is, yeah, you're talking,
Yeah.
over $1.5 million.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but again, I think we can get away with some of those for a little bit longer than that. And the hope is that we're replacing about 1,000 of them, if not slightly more every year, long term, but we're not there at that point to
Yeah.
be able to do that.
And I feel much better personally about saying, let's just, go on a replace them as they break cycle with laptops than I do with network infrastructure.
Yes. I'm a little less, yes, I agree. Yes, if I have a priority, I would say that I would like to replace the network infrastructure before it goes down.
I think you answered the rest of my questions in advance. So is there any other members with questions? Our self-proclaimed Luddite, no questions on IT? Oh, it looks like
Oh,
Paul
I
actually,
think he's gone.
yeah,
I was gonna
it
say there's a lot of.
looks like he just
He
got.
lost connectivity probably.
Needs a little upgrade there, obviously. Okay, well, thank you, Stephen. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. It will get us up here for Liam.
Our closing act for the evening, Liam Hurley, Assistant Superintendent of Finance and Operations.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you. Nice job, Stephen. I actually have Alyssa Berenger joining me, and I believe Sean Mannion may be in the wings at some point, and possibly Regina Moody, our transportation director. So a few people could pop on here. So pleased to present kind of what we're calling just kind of broadly the non-instructional areas. I'm going to go over a few slides. I'm actually going to have Alyssa go through. I've wanted Alyssa and Awena was going to join us, but right now Alyssa's going to go through a number of these. I wanted to kind of have her increasing her presentation skills, and I know she'll do a great job. So certainly plenty of time for any questions we have. So just moving through kind of the sphere of what's in this kind of what we're calling the non-instructional area. This is really kind of staff here at the Education Center. We've used this graphic before, but certainly payroll, planning and project management, that's Stephanie Gilman. Finance is kind of the team that I've got down in my department. Got an accounts payable team, a purchasing office, which works very closely with the city purchasing, transportation, which is Regina and Kristen, our business operations, which is headed up by Amy Mistro, and then our facilities department, and then obviously a number of custodians out in the buildings. The ones in light green are kind of basically the satellites. Katie Hogue, our chief of data and research, and she's got Julie Athanasiadis under her, and then human resources. And I have a slide on human resources and talking a bit about Giovanni and the work that Giovanni Santa is doing, which has been fantastic for us. So that's kind of the ecosystem of the BFP team and kind of the non-instructional of the core of what's making and trying to make basically we're a support system for the school system. So in terms of just kind of the big bucket items in terms of what we're looking to do this year, kind of the three major pieces. First one was the facilities. We're significantly, and I'm really happy to see this, significantly increasing the facilities budget this year by more than $500,000. So that not only restores the $410,000 that the mayor and the executive office had been using to kind of help us the last several years, but we've actually gone above that amount. We've been reporting in the fiscal and ops reports typically upwards of $600,000 to $800,000 in deficits there. So very happy to report that. We are exploring really what this is going to help us into is basically providing more flexibility for building-based needs. We already talked about these cooling centers. This is at really our 8 oldest elementary schools, and for the most part, looking at our libraries. And I think as Anna had mentioned, it really has kind of multiple benefits for us. And I'm going to show the slide as well. In addition to this increase in our facilities budget, we're also getting a great infusion from the city of about $5.3 million for facility projects. There's also about $925,000 for curriculum, but I'll show that slide. That's going to be great. And some of that work is already commenced. Secondly is operational infrastructure. This is kind of a broad area, but this supports some of the school committee guidelines in investing in our future. We put some funds in here to support these, continuing the study. We've had Perkins Eastman out doing the elementary. We wanted to look at the elementary schools. So we have some funds set aside for next year to take a look at those secondary schools. So we really can come back to you guys. We're going to have another report from Perkins Eastman wrapping up the elementary. And next year, we've got some funds to then look at these secondary schools. So we'll have really a great picture. Again, their goal is to look at kind of building conditions and kind of what's the space utilization of these buildings. We have some money in here for routing software, transportation routing software. Right now, we've been just basically utilizing Regina and all her knowledge and kind of routes that we've done for a long time. We need to look at efficiencies and where we can do to implement that, and this routing software is helpful. There's no funding really, particularly for the food service management. You're going to be getting a recommendation, but certainly a lot of time and effort, particularly from Amy Mistro, in terms of looking at our food services management contracts. That's something that we spend a lot of time, and we'll be coming to you, as I said, with the recommendation. And then lastly, and Anna has talked a bit about this in terms of tools to operationalize the district vision, to increase community engagement, data, and strategy. So we've got a number of new software products that are now embedded in our budget, which is fantastic. This is really going to help us on a whole bunch of fronts. Additionally, on the BFP side, we've got a small amount of money that we've set aside to basically submit what's called the Meritorious Budget Award. This is about $1,200 for us to submit this into what's the national organization called ASBO, Association of School Business Officials. They take a look at this budget, they come back and they give us feedback. And I'd be happy to share obviously that feedback and what they give us. But really the goal is to provide a clear, transparent, and great budget to you folks, but to the city of Newton as well. Kind of three big buckets that I think of in the non-instructional. Again, it's really a support role, fiscal management, budgeting and fiscal projections, payroll, all the pieces that we need to do and provide. Fee management, legal compliance with state reporting, audit requirements. There's a lot there. Planning, you obviously know the work that Stephanie and Katie Hogue do and all the planning, enrollment analysis, projections, and long-range planning that we're already doing. And then support services for our schools. And that includes facility maintenance and sustainability, food services, and transportation. So those are the main buckets for us. This is really, I'm presenting on behalf of Joanna here. So the work that is involved with human resources, I think could take up an entire presentation in itself. This is this is what we do. We're about people. These are some of the big bullet points. I won't read all these, but basically, Joanna's come in and has brought in great infusion of energy. The goal is obviously to recruit, retain, and certainly looking at diverse hiring. Anna, not to put you on the spot, but anything on HR you want to say, but that's certainly the key to so much of what we do.
Yeah, I just really appreciate Joanna putting together a strategy that involves all departments, including DEI, the business office, instructional technology, and our teaching and learning office. So it's been a pretty exciting time. We just geared up with a training for all staff as we head into hiring season. We have 3 hiring committees happening for leadership positions right now. And she kicks off all the trainings, very coordinated, but has also been full throttle on recruitment in new venues. So some of the budget adjustments, of course, mean advertising in different places, investments in certain areas where we know we will try to reach those hard to fill positions. So it's pretty exciting. Liam's right. The energy is just very different, very, very high energy, high octane, I'd say.
Palpable. It's great. It's fantastic. Just kind of transitioning, you've seen this slide before, really exciting time in Newton in terms of updating our schools. You see where we've been, kind of the last almost 10 years, Angel Reservis Cabot, Oak Hill Edition, just opening up at our Newton Early Childhood program, and what we've got kind of here on the horizon, Lincoln Elliott, Horace Mann, Countryside Franklin, and then I've got Ward Underwood there. We don't have certainly a date, but that's kind of coming out there. We're going to get some more information. And then these reports, these I think have been really helpful for us. We've got our own internal report. We've got Dr. McKibben's report, demographic report that they presented. And then we've got the Perkins Eastman, the 8 elementary schools. And as I mentioned, we'll be coupling that with kind of secondary schools, specifically probably more looking at the middle schools, if we can look at the high schools as well, but specifically the middle schools, wanting to make sure. I can see Emily nodding her head. So Emily, we got there, and we're gonna make sure we put those into it. So that's one of the keys for us in terms of our kind of our long range planning. This is just a graphic you've seen, but really exciting time. And again, huge kudos to Josh Morris, Alex Valcarci, and Stephanie Gilman on our side. The work they're doing, the time, the energy, and Emily, sorry, I forget to mention you. I know sorry to have for all the plugs, but the work they're doing on all these building projects is enormous. Countryside right now, there's a school building committee going on right now just for getting a vote to submit to the MSBA. So the work is continuous and doing great work, and we're gonna have great products at the end of the day here. Anna had mentioned there was no proposed fee increases for FY25. We had, as you recall, last year in the FY24 budget, we had a pretty large fee increase that the school committee voted at that time. I just wanted to just refresh you on what we had before that. So in FY23 and then went to FY24. So we had a lot of almost $50 fee increases for families. We certainly have, and we talk about it, financial assistance is available to any and all families. We want families to encourage families to apply. We really do not want to deny anyone for the ability to participate for any financial assistance reasons at all. I would say, as I think about FY26, I might want to think about potentially some fee increases, but I really would want to look at what our competitive and neighboring schools, what they're looking at. Again, these costs offset a portion of our expenses. As you know, our expenses go up. But at the same time, I also don't want to place undue burden on our families. So it's something that I think I'd look at maybe before the budget season, potentially in the fall, to come to you folks and at least explore what these options are and get your feedback. Ultimately, it's your vote. So it's really the will of what the school committee wants, but they are important fees for us. And I did actually just want to put the revenue, kind of the change from that fee revenue. So from FY23 to FY with the new fee increases, we got approximately $566,000 increase from that. A lot of that was on bus transportation. One of the big things that we had done with the bus transportation is we added the elementary fee for families. Previously, elementary families did not have to pay the fee. That is unusual for most of the suburban districts. If there's a fee involved, it's typically, all of the anyone subject to the rules in that community would pay a fee. You may want to talk a little bit more about as we get into transportation. I want to talk a little bit more about that. So we're going to go through. Alyssa's going to kind of quickly go through these. These are not certainly the most exciting areas, but they're certainly part of our budget. I want to have Alyssa go through. Alyssa and Sean and Awina and Janelle in my office do an incredible job tracking these. We track these on the fiscal and ops report. So these are important categories. They're really kind of the non-personnel categories. They make up approximately 13% of our entire budget. So although they're not the biggest piece of our budget, they're still really significant. A lot of these areas really are also, I would say, not really discretionary. You've heard Steve talking about the need for him, in terms of his IT budget, but many of these things, utilities, maintenance, contracted services, transportation, these are really kind of requirements unless we want to make kind of changes. I got a question about contracted services that I'd love to talk a little bit about in terms of thinking about the future and areas that we could potentially reduce contracted services as well. Alyssa, why don't I'll pass it over to you and just kind of give a snapshot of this. And as you want me to progress through, I'll go through it.
Wonderful. Thank you, Liam. Hello. So when we're looking at this, our non-personnel expense categories, you'll see that we're not increasing by an incredible amount, 2.1%. We do try overall. You can see that there's some fluctuations between the different categories that I'll go into more depth just in a second. We try to be very responsible with, I'm sorry, Kat. We try to be very responsible with how we budget for our expenses, and we try to limit unnecessary expenses. So sorry. Next slide goes into a little bit more of our history of spending. So you can see it fluctuates year to year. We're really trying to provide the best experiences for our students while also keeping expenses to a minimum so that we can really spend in areas that really foster a good learning environment for our students. So this year going up a little bit. Again, some ups and downs. And this is also found in our by account section of our budget book, if anybody wanted to look more in depth into it. So next slide. So utilities, this is a good news story here. We're only going up by 1.2% from our adjusted budget in fiscal year 24. And the reasons for that, we had huge supply rate increases last year. Natural gas went up by 84% in its supply rate as we entered into a new contract. As we entered into a new contract with our vendor, and this year now we are locked in. So supply rate is going to be staying steady. Usage is also staying steady amongst all of our utilities. Electricity and gas is finally leveled off after increasing an incredible amount after the pandemic. Electricity supply rates will be increasing as we enter into a new contract there in that area. However, we're not expecting anything quite as dramatic as what we were seeing last year with natural gas. And also, again, the usage is just leveled off. The city will be doing solar projects. We have currently some solar projects that offset a little bit of our kilowatt hour usage. That unfortunately, we will, even though we're planning future projects, they will be cost neutral to us. It's just something that the city is doing as part of its ongoing commitment to switching to green energy and to reaching our climate goals. So next slide. So here's a chart of our utility history. You can see lots of ups and downs. It really dipped during the pandemic. And then you can see last year that enormous increase. We had spikes in usage. We had that 84% supply rate increase in gas, and now we're finally getting to coast level. We did never mind. Next slide, sorry. Okay, so maintenance. This is also a good news story, I think. As you all know from all of our fiscal and ops reports that we've been providing you, facilities just has been working with a deficit year over year. We have lots of one-time projects, lots of things that we just can't anticipate when things are going to break. And we are looking to now increase our budget to get maintenance to really be funded at a level that they actually need, so that they won't be overspent. So we are increasing by $564,000 to address those needs. We are also restoring $400,000 in funding that had been cut in 23 and 24. I say cut, but it was paid by the city. The city is not going to be providing that one-time funding anymore, so that needs to come out of our budget. We are reducing by $250,000 for what we call summer projects. But all in all, that still comes out to $564,000 net increase. Next slide. So in addition to our increasing our facilities budgets, the city is also generously providing us $6.2 million in supplemental funding for curriculum and facility improvements. And I'm not going to read them all off here, but you can see a lot of these are very substantial investments. They are all needed across our school buildings. I'm sure that the school committee has seen just what dire need some of our schools are in for capital improvements. So we are very grateful to the city for providing that. Contracted services is dipping a little bit by $365,000. a lot of this is due to special education budgeting less in their contracted services. Primarily, behavioral therapists are contracted out when student services cannot fill a position, but the student still needs a behavioral therapist. They will contract that out. As the school committee has seen, well, as you all have seen, we are making significant investments in our staffing for next year, and so we are thinking that we're hoping that we won't need to contract out for those services so much. We also are slightly increasing our outside substitute vendor due to, so we contract with Precision staffing for daily staffing absences. That has been very successful. The vendor has been able to staff, and we're doing really well with that. So in order to keep in line with spending trends, we're just increasing that slightly. And legal services, we've now settled the contract with NTA, and we can reduce that budget. I know that it's saying that we are budgeting 100,000, and that's a $105,000 reduction from the FY24 budget. That is the budget. I know we are spending a little bit more than that, but that is currently what we have budgeted.
Well, if I can just interrupt. So there was a question about are there potentially other contracted services areas? So obviously, certainly kind of the behavioral therapist, legal going down. Other areas that I can kind of try to think about. One, it doesn't show up here as actually our special ed transportation. So that's actually going down. We've got less reliance or less number of vans being out there. So that's come down. The substitutes is something that we've looked at. I think that we need these day-to-day subs in our buildings. If there's a change in model of how we do substitutes, that certainly would be an area. So we've contracted out our food services, we've contracted out our yellow buses, we've contracted out our specialized transportation. Some of these have been, I think, really good decisions for us. Our food services, for example, at one point was, I think, more than $1 million in the NPS budget. I think more than a decade ago. It's now essentially zero in our budget. So there's been some advantages for us to have that. But it is something that we look at, and if we can provide service in-house better and at a lower cost, I think we'd want to do it. There'll be a slide as well that I think is that I think we should be proud of, is just basically the costs have gone up, but the total number of students going out of district has come down. So you'll see a slide that was about 10 years ago, more than 200 students, and now down about 100 to about 135 students. So less students going out. So that's a big area. And I don't know if there's any other kind of contracted services you can think of that you'd be thinking about in the future.
I mean, certainly, I think I see Casey online. I don't know if she wants to address this, but she's been working really hard to make sure that we're hiring versus contracting out. Casey, I don't want to put you on the spot, but would you mind responding to that?
Yeah, sure. So I think Alyssa talked a bit about the contracted services for BTs, but we've also had to contract out for speech and language pathologists and OTs. We were looking for school psychologists to contract with to do some of our testing, but actually couldn't find anybody. We've had some who've contracted with us before in the past who we use for bilingual or testing in another language other than English, who are now helping us test in English for us, but those are actually being covered by our current school psychologists on staff.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alyssa.
Thank you. So yes, tuition, we were talking about. So tuition is going to be 15.8 million projected in FY25. That is with circuit breaker offsets. It will be a net out of district circuit breaker offsets and also carry forward. We will be spending a net of 7 million, and the other tuition expenses. So tuition doesn't just include the out of district tuition. There's some smaller lines too, like tuition assistance for staff, career and vocational tuition, and summer tuitions. here you can see how much we've been spending in tuition. This is gross. And as you can see, it has really just been growing tremendously, especially starting in FY24 when there was a 14% rate increase that was approved by OSD. So in FY25, we are seeing our budget continuing, our expenses continuing to grow, but not quite as dramatically. So we have a circuit breaker carry forward reliance, as I mentioned just very briefly. This is like multi-year balancing account that we use in order to just balance the next year's budget. In fiscal year 23, it was 3.47 million, and we've been trying to lower our dependence on one-time carry forward funding. It dropped to 2.28, as you can see in FY24. Unfortunately, in FY25, we are still needing to rely on carry forward funds of $3 million. We are very grateful, however, for the education stabilization account, which has helped us, which will certainly help us in the next 5 years as we are we're working on building a sustainable budget. We will also be looking for possible revenue opportunities or savings or efficiencies whenever possible in order to continue to lower our reliance on one-time carry forward funds. Transportation, this is also a good news story this year. So we are increasing, we are currently in year 3 of 5 of a yellow bus contract with our vendor, increasing 4.2% on our rate. Our total percent that we're actually increasing here in yellow bus isn't quite as high as 4.2 because of our projected offset with transportation fees. We have also special education transportation is also it's actually decreasing a little bit. We have a 3% contract rate, or your 3% contracted rate increase. So we're in year 2 of a 5-year contract. We do get also some circuit breaker funding for special education transportation. And our budget is able to just slightly decrease next year because even with this contracted rate increase, we've just had more students sharing vans, some reduced driver availability. So we've had some projected savings this year and last year. And so we're looking to budget fiscal year 25 in line with what we've actually been spending with our trends. So we are looking at other ways to maybe try to save money in the future for transportation, including only providing state mandated transportation services. We are looking to maybe take advantage of a bus depot. I know Liam's been talking about that for a while. We're also just trying to have some transportation routing software next year. That's not to save money, but that is to make the to make things more I would like to take some of the stress off Regina, honestly. She is just doing so much in the office. Just we're relying so completely on her. And I just hope that we never lose her because I don't know what we would do. So hoping to have some routing software that will sort of automate some of this that's right now in Regina's head and only in Regina's head.
Yeah, so that routing software certainly is going to try to make us more efficient so we can have some stuff for the maps and for families. So, okay.
Thank you, Liam. Supplies are not really increasing much at all, a net of $5,000. There's some increases, there's some decreases, but overall supplies are staying flat. I do want to note that per pupil expenditures, which per pupil funding is funding that is given to each individual elementary, middle, and high school. It's based on a formula of however many dollars. It's $100 $100 and some per student, and times the projected enrollment. So we've had to unfortunately cut some of this funding in fiscal year 23 and 24. We're able to restore that now. So $50K more is going to the elementary schools, the elementary school level. Middle school is remaining stable in its funding, and high schools, which had to unfortunately be cut, the rate had to be cut in fiscal year 24, is now being restored to that fiscal year 23 funding level. Equipment and software, there's that $128,000 equipment increase, which Steve Rottendi has spoken about. It's mostly Parent Square and Thought Exchange. He's talked about that in his presentation, so I'll not trouble you with that anymore. Athletics. So the athletics department, the high schools, they have their own revolving accounts, and we subsidize them as needed in order to pay for programmatic costs.
Did we lose you, Alyssa?
Hello?
Yep, we got you now.
Okay, great. Yeah, sorry, my internet connection's a little wonky. So we will be increasing our funding to the high schools for the programmatic costs by a bit, 200,000, because there are new contractual costs, additional staffing. I think you all know about the new assistant ADs, and partially restoring just a little bit of the cuts that we had to make in fiscal year 24. So I'm going to hand this back to Liam. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Alyssa. So I'm going to just quickly kind of go through the last couple of these pieces here. So grants you've heard a little bit about already, by 24. See, most of our grant revenue is based on what are called entitlement grants. It's kind of a formula for that. One of the areas that we have a little bit of risk on is kind of the Title I grant, potentially going down. That may impact some of the offerings that we can have. Again, Title I is something where you have to do supplemental funding. You can't supplant. There's a term they use for this, so it's something that we've got to take a look at. METCO is also another area that is maybe potentially level funded, and I think as Anna talked about, level funding is even a challenge for us as we've got staffing costs on that. They go up. That becomes a little bit of a challenge. We've been getting an additional METCO grant, which we had not been counting on, that I think basically is going to cover us for this for FY25. We can use that. It's actually we can use it for some of our special education costs for our vans that transport some of our Boston students. That will basically cover us, I think, for that level funding with METCO. But I would suggest, and I know Anna's looking at legislative breakfast, but that'd be an area that I think, METCO funding is important.
Which is tomorrow, by the way. But I did want to forecast for the committee that we did receive notice that the Department of Education is putting forward in draft form limitations on the use of METCO funding, which is part of a 2-year process where they did an audit of how our funds used. And let's just say there's no rhyme or reason across all of the METCO districts for what is spent. Having worked in 2 METCO districts, vastly different ways of spending the money, but the idea here is to provide a baseline of reliable funding expenditures for any METCO district. For example, there are some METCO districts that do not have after-school busing for children. And that seems like a critical part of a child's experience in schools. So there would be a requirement that that would be one place that money could be spent. The reason I forecast it for you will not affect FY25, but it may affect subsequent years of funding, in that the use of funding for staffing must be tailored closely to METCO staffing. So in our particular budget, and the public should know this, the METCO budget for years has provided hundreds of thousands, millions over the life of the METCO program of staffing for any student. So 7 teachers, 7 FTE are currently paid for by the METCO grant, not by the Newton operating budget. So I just want to say that now in a time of peace before we have to move to a different budget conversation subsequently. It's very much in draft form, and I'll certainly give feedback on that. And I do think it's good when METCO programs contribute to the district, but it's going to be a challenge, I think, if they make those expectations more stringent, not for FY25, but beyond.
Thanks, Ann. And again, in Newton, we obviously certainly provide 9 buses that the METCO grant covers. We've got a METCO director, an assistant, and then counselors that are all covered in that. Newton, I think, is by far the largest METCO district. And so we call a teacher credit. We use about $750,000 of that METCO grant to cover Newton staff. And again, kind of the thought there that, a majority of time is spent with our teachers. Hopefully that would be there, but if that was not there and it was not allowed, that would certainly have an impact for us. We've also talked a bit, so ESSER 3, this is the last kind of the COVID relief funds is expiring. I think we've done a good job in terms of just trying to manage that. We'll be bringing, we've increased the educational stabilization account. We've got 1.5 FTE that were on that grant that we're going to be bringing forward into the education stabilization account. So it's very exciting to have those staff with us. Food services, you're going to be hearing a lot more about this, but just suffice to say, coming up, you'll be hearing a recommendation from us. We had 4 strong vendors taking a look at us and have put in proposals, and we'll be coming, as I said, very shortly to make a recommendation to the school committee. So please sit tight on that for us. Just a really broad category. I just like to kind of just throw that out there in terms of benefits. Overall benefits are growing at about 3.3%. So if you recall, Alyssa was talking about kind of those non-personnel expenses. I think it was 2.2. So benefits at approximately 3.3. The biggest benefit obviously is our health insurance. It's a big bucket that's growing at 4.3%. We have Medicare payroll taxes that we pay, dental insurance, workers' compensation. We've level funded that. We've actually gone down. This has been something that we worked closely with the mayor with last year, reducing that Medicare Part B reimbursement payment. So there's an expectation that's going to be kind of being cut in half each of the next couple of years. So that's a reduction of savings for us. And then our unemployment number, we were in a position last year, we needed to increase that, certainly with the reductions we made. We think we can bring that down as well. So that's just kind of the benefit lines. Almost there. This has gone on for a while. So certainly key issues to monitor. And I think just kind of echoing Anna's comments about basically, are we supporting our educational values to move towards a thriving budget? And you know that there's still certainly more there, supporting ongoing student behavioral, social, emotional, academic needs. I don't need to read all of these, but certainly continue the long-range planning, impact of inflationary pressure. There's a lot on ours. And I think one of the things that you'll certainly will expect from me and my team is the continued fiscal monitoring and multi-year budgeting we've got to do. We'll be reporting to you folks. We'll be we'll be with you along the way. So this is the timeline still. We're certainly right now, we're on March 27, April 1, public budget hearing. April 4th, continued discussion and hopefully a straw vote. April 9th, looking for a final vote. We certainly have a little more time that week if we're not ready for a vote.
We have different times now, right, for one of those meetings?
There may have been a move.
This was supposed to be today. Yeah, so I think they're all.
Yes, this one is an incorrect one.
Sorry about that. That's the older version. Thank you.
April 1st is the public hearing, I believe.
Yeah.
So Monday is the public hearing.
6 o'clock.
6 o'clock. Okay.
6
Yes.
o'clock.
I think that's 5:30.
April 9th is 5 or
6:30.
5.
So
You can update the
We
slide.
moved that up to 5 or 5:30. I can't remember.
A lot happened between submission of the slide and the schedule.
Yes.
It's 5:30, Chris, by the way, on the 9th.
no, the 9th was supposed to be the school choice. It has now been moved to April 24th. I'll have to update. This is all wrong.
This is old. Yeah. Sorry about that.
Currently. Your
Yes.
fault.
That Wednesday, April 24th, though, it is a budget presentation. It's technically, I think, to the Finance Committee and the Programs and Services Committee, something Dr. Nolan and myself have gone. Certainly, I think school committee are welcome to go. I think we've moved potentially, I think, a school committee now to the 23rd. And if that sounds correct. So we'll get a redraft out to you folks.
Mayor Fuller, are you the 16th? Or you're, okay.
That stayed. I think that's it. Sorry for any confusion on that piece right there. So open to any questions we may have.
Okay. Do any members have any questions not related to the schedule?
Yeah. Thanks for that presentation. Just a couple questions for the programs, the program fees like busing and the program fees like busing and sports.
Yeah.
How common are fees like that when you look at peer districts?
I would say they're pretty common. I would say probably the majority of districts have those. I could provide some backup to have that, but I would say many surrounding communities have these types of fees. They take various shapes and sizes for different reasons, but it's pretty common.
Okay. And do our fees compare to those?
Yeah, I would say that they compare with it. We were probably now probably slightly above the midpoint, I would think at this point, given this last round of increases. But yeah, we're similar. There's some places that with higher bus fees, even than where we are, maybe even higher athletic fees. But I think we're in the ballpark in many of these pieces.
Cool. And just curious, what is a bus depot and how does it gain efficiencies?
So that's a good one. And it's a long conversation. A bus depot is essentially looking for, the idea would be to try to find land where we could park buses for our vendor. The idea is not that we were going to be owning the buses, but that we would have the ability, and it has multiple benefits. But one, we've only in the past, since I've been here, and this is true for many school districts, we've only had one vendor bid on our bus. The requirement is that they need to have a site themselves, either within Newton or contiguous community. It's very difficult to do given the cost of land around here. There's a benefit of having a bus depot as well. So to attract a potential other vendor, our vendor now is currently paying, I think, almost $25,000 a month just for their land. If we were to able to provide that, either in charge of them, maybe at a reduced rate, or we would be a negotiation, they could reduce our daily rate. We could see savings to $200,000 to $300,000 per year. And again, additionally attract other vendors at some point in the future. And the last benefit, and this has been something other districts are looking to do, it's quite complicated and a long conversation, is the idea of potentially trying to electrify a bus fleet over time.
Right.
You would need to get, that infrastructure. It's again complicated in that we don't own our buses, we don't maintain the buses, they're not our bus drivers. But if we had a site that we could help electrify, that they could have a charging station, there's some ability, particularly in the summertime, where they can actually be used as kind of a grid system, that then these buses then could be deployed out there. But it's very difficult and it's not easy to find land, certainly in Newton, and we know the costs in Newton are also very high. So I hope that explains it, but
It does.
it's not
Yeah,
an
that's
easy.
super helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Tamika and then Emily.
Thanks, Chris. And thanks, Liam and Alyssa. It's always good to have you at the school committee. I do have a couple of questions about sorry, my budget book just went flying. Hold the phone. About the line in the presentation about the investments in funding for secondary school buildings and condition utilization study. I love that. I think that's wonderful. That's been an investment that we've been hoping to have for a number of years. And so I'm glad that's moving forward. But I do see that it's coupled with a few things, and I'm hoping that you can sort of decouple that for me and break it out. I see that we're targeting the secondary study as well as bus routing software, as well as support for the new food service contract. And if I'm looking at the budget book on page 60, line 414, I'm assuming that's the line that covers the secondary school building condition portion. And then if I jump to the following page 61, line 438, I'm assuming that's the portion that covers the transportation software, which for Regina's sake, I think that's great for efficiencies. I agree, Alyssa. I don't see where we are parking the funds for the third prong of that, the food service management contract. So can you help me understand where that's coming from and what that looks like?
Sure, and I'm sorry for any confusion. So the benefit
worries.
part about the food services management contract is that there's actually, you won't find any funding in here. So that is that is a fully self-funding program. And in fact, these vendors are actually what they call guaranteeing a return. So we'll be talking about that very shortly, about what that return looks like to us. So I'm sorry, when I talked about the operational infrastructure, Tamika, I think it was just that it's been a lot of time and effort for us to put into, particularly Amy Mistro, in a purchasing that we've invested trying to look at, the best option for Newton. I know as Anna did her barbecue tours, we certainly heard food. We heard loud and clear that food is something that families and students really care about, and we want to improve that quality of our food. And so, fortunately, it's not a funding item, but a time and energy effort that we have committed to, and trying to get the best food service provider that we can, and we'll be making the recommendations. So there's no funding with it. And Sean and Alyssa, I think that Tamika, you found that line. It's approximately, I think we're budgeting, I think $75,000, Tamika, for the consultant for the study, the secondary study piece, and then approximately $35,000 for the transportation. And I think that is
correct.
That's that line 414 you identified, Tamika. So I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you. And
Great question.
pleased that we're investing for the transportation software again and the secondary schools. So good job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tamika. Emily?
I'm gonna repeat some of the stuff that Tamika said, and then I have a quick question. Thank you for including the secondary schools in the next step. It's so critical for our long-range facilities planning. I'm thrilled that it's in there. I didn't know it was going to be in there. I'm so happy it's in there. So thank you for that. Alyssa, I wanted to thank you for giving that presentation. And as always, your cat is the star of the show. So here's my question, which is actually about the secondary. Do we have any sense in terms of timing for roughly when we might be getting those results next year? Or is that just too far in the future?
I think she asked about the timing of the secondary study.
Yes, Emily, it was a little hard to hear.
Oh, I'm sorry. I can ask. Is this better?
Yes.
Okay.
Better now.
Yeah. So my question is, what do we know roughly what the timing will be for the results of the Perkins Eastman and the secondary study?
So I may have actually messed up the volume here. So we don't have a specific timing, Emily. We certainly want to have this done in FY25. I think the fact that we're rolling right into Perkins Eastman, finishing up this project right here. I'd love to talk with Stephanie and Josh in terms of how we basically continue, if we can continue the relationship with them, or if we need to go back out to bid. So I can't give you a specific timing, but we want to have a recommendation some point, hopefully at this time or earlier next year.
Okay, I wasn't sure if we would tack it on to the existing contract or if we have to go out to bid again. So great, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. Other questions? Mayor Fuller, and then Amy, and then Rajiv. Okay. Rajiv, then Mayor Fuller, then Amy.
So going back to a topic we kind of punted on a while back, which is the private school transportation. So I saw the note that we're looking into providing just the state mandated transportation. It looks like that isn't factored in yet. So do we know what kind of impact that would have? And even if you don't have it now, that's absolutely fine. But in terms of volumes of riders and so on, do we have an approximate idea of how many?
So we do have this answer because someone asked this before. So Just lay it all out, Liam.
Sure. So a lot of moving pieces here. And when we talk about state mandated transportation, there's a few prongs. The one that I had specifically brought up with the school committee was potentially providing what's called the statutory, what I believe is a statutory responsibility for our private school riders residing within Newton. Again, that's not for any specialized transportation or van transportation. So right now we have approximately 5 yellow buses in the morning and 6 yellow buses in the afternoon that transport approximately 130 students per day. Approximately 100 of those students go to Solomon Schechter, and about 30 or so students go to Mount Alvernia. I actually had the sheet here: Mount Alvernia, Newton Country Day, and Jackson School as well. So the discussion that I wanted to have with the school committee, and I did not account for that in this budget, Rajiv, does not actually achieve dollar savings for Newton Public Schools. However, it would free those buses up for us to then provide to utilize those buses more efficiently for our own bus ridership, where we're experiencing some timeliness and some overcrowding, particularly at the high schools. And Regina was going to be trying to join. I don't think I see her right now. Regina was going to try and join me.
I'm here.
Are you
I'm
here?
here, Liam.
Okay. Hi, Regina. So, Regina, let me finish, but you correct me if I've got Regina Moody, our transportation director, is here. So the idea was that those buses that then, after they do their current stop, are then utilized for our public routes already. So they're kind of part of our multi-tier system, but they would be more fully utilized. So we would not have to do that. And so when we looked at the ridership, and the rule, the basic rule statutorily is that we have to provide transportation by law. Our responsibility is to transport students no further from their home to their assigned school. So if they live 1.2 miles to their assigned school, in their private school is 1.2 miles or closer, we would need to provide transportation. If that private school happened to be 1.6 miles instead of 1.2, we would not need to provide transportation. When we looked at the roster, we basically would almost not have to provide any transportation. I think there was maybe 2 students that we believe we would probably put on either an elementary or middle school bus. So thus freeing up those buses. So I've gone on too long. Regina, why don't you Regina's been living and breathing this for a long time. We've talked about it for a long time. I think it is something that the school committee should consider. It would be something that would help Newton Public Schools, but it doesn't necessarily save us money right now. However, we are under pressure, and we did not add a yellow bus. We didn't propose a yellow bus for next year. I think Regina would ideally have liked a yellow bus. We did not add an additional yellow bus, but we are under pressure. She maybe would like to if she could. Yes. So Regina, to add to kind of the private schools in terms of what I talked about there.
You pretty much hit it head on. It won't result in savings. We're not going to save a bus or 2 buses, but right now we're really in need of more buses. We've had to close bus pass registration to both high schools, 1 middle school. I can see that happening very early in September or October. It's going to be a lot of work. We're going to be turning people away. We're maxed out. We don't have time. We don't have space. I had gone to Liam begging and pleading. I really need 2 buses. 1 would help. 2 would be ideal. If we went to what's mandated by the state, it would free up buses. So, and we'd be able to solve a lot of problems.
How would you utilize those buses, Regina? So there's 5, I think it's 5 in the morning and 6 in the afternoon. So what could you do with
Right.
those buses then?
We could certainly use them for some middle school issues we're having. We have some crowding we've been unable to solve. We've got some elementary as well, especially at dismissal. Those buses all the private schools overlap all of our elementary and Brown Middle School. We've got some crowding at some of our elementaries where we're on the brink. We really need to be splitting up some of our elementary routes some of those routes have gotten very long. We have some elementary buses in the afternoon, because I don't have another bus available, have 10, 11 stops. We've got districts that have 2 or 3 buffer zones, so our buses are kind of hitting different areas around what used to be a school district, and it's made the routes long. It's not an easy day for these kids. They start early and they're dealing with a lot. So, and the buses again are crowded. We're on the verge of, we're on the verge of closing registration for at least 1 elementary, possibly 2.
And,
So
and-
it's,
sorry, go ahead, please. Didn't mean
yeah,
to.
it's pretty much solving the issues that are at hand and getting bigger.
So Regina, I know you hear this a lot more and a lot more directly than I do. But what we're hearing is about crowded buses, students having to sit in the aisle on buses, and essentially a lot of challenges. And I know your office does incredible work trying to resolve these and trying to keep everything running the way it should.
Thank you.
But and very much appreciate that, right? And unfortunately, that means you are the person everyone goes to every time their kid doesn't have a seat. And
Yep, it's okay. It's what I'm here for.
Right, but I would want to take that burden away. So in this situation, it's the service, it's the safety, it's trying to make sure that we are doing what's required.
Right.
But at this point, it seems like for much less crowded buses, so 30 students per bus based on what you're saying.
Yeah, and that's one of the challenges, because, for the most part, we could fit, a lot of kids on less buses, but we have to cover the entire city. We're not covering just a school district like the Zervis district, or even the Bigelow district, or even one of the high school districts. We have to cover the entire city. For, private school like Solomon Schechter, they're way on the south side of the city, and we're starting routes in the Lower Falls and down on Craft Street. And so we can't put more kids on those buses. They're already an hour long. We're picking kids up starting at 6:40 and 6:50 in the morning. It's almost the same as our Boston routes, so it's not like we can consolidate. I would love to consolidate. We had our afternoon consolidated, and it was becoming a big problem. A lot of complaints when their kids are out of school at 2:45 and not home till, 4:30. So.
And just to confirm, do these students pay for bus passes?
The majority do not, because they are more than 2 miles from their school. The majority of our private school kids are elementary age. There are some 6th grade and above, but that's limited. So, and like I said, the private schools are on the outskirts. 2 of them are way on the south side. One of them is down by BC, and the other one's down by the Watertown line. So the majority of the kids are not close enough to have to pay for the bus pass.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So this may not necessarily be the time to make a decision, but I am strongly in favor of sticking to what's legally required and improving the quality of bus service for our students. A quick search on Newton's Facebook pages will quickly yield a lot of feedback on the current state of how crowded our buses are. So,
yeah, and like I said, we're pretty much maxed out. I made quite a few changes throughout the year, freed up space on some buses, moved things around. We send out memos, we shift stops. And it works, and we've solved many problems so far this year. Right now, I have 2. I have no options. So it's a struggle. It's a daily struggle, and I feel bad. It's hard for me to explain this to families and have kids even call and have to explain it to them. So it would be nice to have a little more flexibility to help these kids out.
Thank you. And
Sure.
just one other very quick thing
go
on this is the last time we discussed private school busing, one of the important points a fellow school committee member made was these are parents who also need to plan for the next year and so on. So a decision on this would be good because it would give private school families who are currently using buses the opportunity to plan for how they would handle transportation starting in the fall. We don't necessarily want to delay for a long time our decision on it. I'll stop here.
Okay. Thank you, Rajiv. And just on that point, and I know we did discuss this back in the fall. I think we had wanted to come back to it earlier, and then something got in the way. I can't remember what it was that kind of took over the agenda. I think one other point that's worth making is if you take a kid who lives down in this the very south part of the city, down by Memorial Spalding, and that kid goes to Fessenden, they make a choice to opt out of saying, I am going to choose not to send my kid to Memorial Spalding, but to send them to Fessenden. They will get that busing provided to them for free. If you take their neighbor who says, I'm going to choose to not send my kid to Memorial Spalding, but I'm going to send them to Franklin School, and we allow that through our transfer process, that child will not have busing available to them at all at any price. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. So our out of
I mean,
transfer.
this is like
Right.
a no-brainer in my opinion. I mean, that
I just add one point though,
go ahead.
That kid's neighbor who is going to Memorial Spalding is then paying $400 to take the bus to their school.
No, if you choose to go beyond outside of your district, we do not provide busing.
No. I'm saying this
But within that,
within that same district, you have kids who are paying for, or families who are paying for a bus just to go within their district.
correct.
That's right.
I'm just outlining the fact that the free, it's not equitable. I'm not sure.
I'm not sure I followed.
We did though, so it's okay.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm sorry, I
For
just,
the same circumstances of travel area, private school students do not pay and our students do pay within their
A
district.
kid who needs a bus
Yes.
in Memorial Spalding and doesn't get it for free.
I was
understood
a
now.
Teacher.
Yes.
Clarity.
So I don't know. I mean, I think it's something I'd like us to take up. I don't know if this is something we can, if it's too late from a planning perspective, logistics perspective for this coming school year, or if it's something that we have to think about for the following year. But I mean, I think it's something that we should be.
In terms of family logistics, the earlier a decision is made, the better.
Agreed. Okay, moving on, Mayor Fuller.
It is worth discussing. I'd encourage Regina and Liam to think about when excuse the pun, a fuller presentation could be made so that we can think it through. And just on that topic, I don't know if this helps at all. And it may not, so it's it's likely a bad idea. Is it possible perhaps to offer for a fee to these private school families? You can still have a yellow bus available, get some income. You'd have to think what you price it, but I'm not sure everybody would opt in, and it might just make Regina's head explode because it's yet one more variable that is too difficult, but it struck me as possibly an option. as a revenue enhancement so that you can afford another bus.
Right. So I think that this had come up before, and the issue is we essentially need to provide something equitable. Right? So if there is a student who within the Memorial Spalding district, just to continue on that line, who is going a certain distance within the district from home to school, we can provide the equivalent service. There is no equivalency for someone going from Memorial Spalding to Fessenden or elsewhere. So I think that would be a challenge. We either keep it level and make sure that all students, including those who have chosen to go or whose families have chosen to send them to private school, are getting the baseline services. I think carving out a special kind of a special approach for that could be problematic.
Look forward to the longer discussion and wrestling that one. Two other questions, and I don't know that we have to talk about tonight. Newton Community Ed, at some point, fill us in, is it cost neutral, providing revenues, actually losing money? I know that there's all sorts of, it's a state statute about community ed, but again, it doesn't have to be tonight, but curious.
Yeah, I think the Newton Community Ed is something that I think we should discuss. Newton Community Ed falls under Newton Public Schools, and for many years, Newton Community Ed had been basically operating with basically a surplus. I would kind of the high level, and I think it might be worth bringing our director Kate Carpenter in joining a meeting and discuss it. I would say the Newton Community Ed kind of financial position over the last number of years has gone down. They have been, since COVID and participation has eroded their total revenue. And they have staff members, and so there's a combination of things that financially they're not in the same position that they were in at one point in a number of years ago. So I think that would be something that I think I would like to bring to the school committee and discuss. Thank you for bringing that up. I think it would be a worthwhile discussion.
And the only other question, 4.3% on health insurance. I expected it to be higher.
We're using, thank you. So we're using, and this was a discussion with Maureen, offset of $700,000 in the health insurance line.
So for this year.
So the rate increase is approximately, call it 7% or so. And the working with Ms. Lemieux on the city side, just to kind of play this out, there was a $1.4 million, this gets a little complicated, but there was a $1.4 million bridge grant. We've kind of split that over 2 years. We still have some work to do with Maureen on that, but the plan for FY25, given the kind of significant increase in health insurance, the rate was that we were going to apply $700,000, basically discounting that. So thank you for that clarification.
Just so folks know, you can see this in the Boston Globe, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, whatever your newspaper of choice is. Health insurance premiums across the country and here in the city of Newton are going up significantly. In a weird way, we're kind of pleased it's only 7.4% because it's 8% is kind of the common percent increase. It's huge dollars, huge impact on all of us as human beings and as managers. So it's a really tough time in the healthcare industry, and we're feeling it.
Thank you. Amy?
My question's so fast. In terms of contracted services, I was actually wondering about the maintenance side, in terms of whether or not a district of our size contracts out for electricians, for sort of the custodial and facility side.
Yeah, so we do have, so certainly our custodians are our staff, and the city goes out and procures contracts for a number of things. And the city actually does have staff that can do a number of things. They've got a plumber, we do have staff, but there are certainly electricians, HVAC technicians, and we can handle a number of things. I don't know how to quantify a number of things, but we can do some things in-house, but we will have technicians in, particularly HVAC technicians, if there's electrical work, any of kind of like the summer projects, if there's kind of a bigger project, flooring work, bigger, a large plumbing job. So we've got vendors that we've already kind of vetted and have kind of contracts with. So we contract those out. And, that's one of the things that we had put in the facility kind of slide is those rates have gone up. Again, everything has gone up, but those rates for these vendors have gone up as well.
Yeah, I'd be curious to think about as we try to be better stewards of our facilities and more proactive, whether or not there's any savings to incur by building up our in-house capacity to respond to issues.
So the city, Josh Morse Public Buildings, that department provides these services to all our buildings, including the Newton Public Schools. And I promise you, Josh thinks all the time about quality, speed, cost, on what we do in-house versus outhouse. Outhouse? I don't think I want to use that word. Out of house.
No outhouses here.
So it is, and I would also just say, staffing shortages for these types of skilled jobs are real.
Yes, we do have some old buildings, but they all have plumbing, so no outhouses. Thank you. Anything else, Amy?
No.
Okay. I have, yes, Unping next, and then Barry.
Thank you very much. A lot of stuff. I'm a little bit curious about the proposed fee increases for fiscal 24. That was quite significant increase, right, compared with the past few years.
Yes.
And I'm wondering what's the community feedback? Any outcries, complaints? How could you do that? I'm paying this. And any increase of applying for a scholarship or some financial support because of our increase?
Yeah, good. Thank you, Anping. Yes, so the school committee voted those fee increases. I have heard a little bit in the beginning about some of the fee increases. Our athletic directors were a little bit concerned about these fee increases going up on families as well. We have, and we put a little bit of a blurb in here in terms of our financial assistance. We, I think, have seen a slight uptick in terms of those number of families applying for financial assistance. I think it's gone kind of almost from that 13, 14 up to almost 15%. So we've seen a little increase for families applying. I don't know if it's because of the fee or just financial, just financial need of families, just overall. I have not heard much beyond that. I heard some comments from some families during our strike period of the fee. That was something that some families were upset about, that they paid a fee and that was an increased fee and that they were not participating. But it was not really the increased fee. So I've not really heard too much. I mean, we've had still, again, you hear on busing. We've got robust participation. Too much, obviously, we need to meet that demand. Athletics, I think, has got still, again, high demand for athletics. And again, one of the things that I would just continue to stress is we want families, if they need financial assistance, we want them to do that. So, but again, we collected almost more than $500,000 in that fee revenue. So that was something significant for us to be able to offset our budget.
Yeah, that's good income. 566,000. Okay, well, probably people realize the inflation rate is very high. So in that sense, if a reasonable mind will think, well, if school increase, okay. At that time when you guys proposed this, I was a little bit thinking, oh boy, sometime, almost 30 increase from like $150 to $200. That's probably close to. So, okay. Certainly our school committee, I don't recall we received any letter from parents saying, you know, how could you guys approve such a significant increase? We did. Okay, probably.
So we did receive some emails, not a high volume, but the ones I recall, I'd have to go look them up, or you could, were more related to athletics fees, and then more so for multi-sport students. And we have obviously some incredible athletes at the high school level who play more than one sport. And I think an explanation of the family maximum and Liam, if I remember correctly, the much more streamlined application for financial support, now online, easier to get to, I think helped address some of those issues. So
okay,
we heard a little bit. It's been a while since we've heard anything else. During the strike, as Chris said, there was actually quite a bit. Like we're paying these fees, but our students are going to miss out on playoffs, sports, etc. And
that's certainly understandable, but not directly related to this fee increase. It's just because they missed these opportunities. But okay, good to know. Very quickly, the other things regarding benefits, I try to do mental math here. For the Medicare Part B reimbursement, and I'm looking at the fiscal 25 budget, $357,000, and then change from fiscal year 24 adjusted budget minus 326,000. So I'm wondering, this percentage 47 minus percent. I try to figure out. First of all, Medicare Part B.
I
I assume that we had quite some discussion, but this percentage, I could not understand fully. We save money, or really we save money, or because, you know, the money just changed the sources. So
when we changed carriers last year to Blue Cross Blue Shield, the cost for the vast majority of retirees dropped dramatically on their out-of-pocket payments. Simultaneously, we, over a 2-year period, decided we had been providing to retirees, I'll call it a stipend, that isn't the correct word, a payment towards their Medicare Part B, which when it first happened years and years and years ago, we had to do, but then we didn't have to do. So we took advantage of their drop in cost to phase out our support for Medicare Part B, but we did it over a 2-year period. So half was last year in FY24, and the other half is coming right now for FY25. So next year, when Liam gives the presentation, there will be 0 in the Medicare Part B. Have I said that pretty correctly?
I think that sounds correctly. Yes. So we were paying retirees on paying approximately, I think, between $915 and $925, and it was not a requirement. We were doing this. I think it was a deal that was done a long time ago. And as we looked at health insurance, and as the mayor said, we went out to bid. I think we found an attractive, retiree plan, and we said, why are we making this payment? It was actually it was a lot of money in our budget. It was a significant amount. As the mayor said, we phased that out. So that was part of the budget plan, in FY24, and now another half, or 47%, I think, in that budget is being saved. Again, that's a savings for us, so that's a benefit to our budget.
Thank you. And I know it's a little bit complicated. When I first learned about this, I said, that was a nice benefit. I did not get it from my workplace. Well, anyway, so I know it's a, legacy, it's historical and we have to honor that. Okay, so this 47.7% is a little bit difficult to, calculate. Because,
Yeah, that's just
It
the
was
percentage
half
change.
Last year,
Yeah.
half this year.
It's just the percentage change. Yeah, just from what it is.
Thank you. And on Ping, on the point of the fees, we had projected the bus transportation fee increase to be $320,000 and it worked out to $305,000. And for high school athletics, I'm thinking those numbers from last year's budget.
Yes.
For high school athletics, we projected a $140,000 increase in fee revenue and it ended up being $200,000. So I think that shows you, people are still utilizing the services at the same or better than the rate than we had projected with the increase. So in terms of voting with their dollars, people still value those programs very much. I think all my questions were actually answered, Liam. I think the one thing I'd like to point out that I think, maybe just needs to be highlighted is in the contracted services, the $225,000 of outside, sort of therapeutic work that, we're anticipating. I mean, that's a direct result of the $4 million we're getting in overlay funds, and a direct result of that increased level of staffing at our elementary schools. So that's $225,000 that we're, and that's a run rate number that's going to be year after year after year and probably increasing at a rate faster than the rate of our budget, I would guess. So that's, just something that I think we need to all be aware of, that's real money we're saving, so to speak, by virtue of making this investment that's going to, benefit our kids far more than our budget. But that's certainly a nice impact there. Any other? Yep, Brigitte, please go ahead. Oh, sorry, Barry.
It'll be
Forgot
quick.
about you. I
That's
apologize.
okay. So back to there was talk about plumbing and electrical at one point. I don't remember exactly what the conversation was, but my question is related. Obviously, there's no shortage of building projects. So I'm just curious. I'm not sure who the right person to answer this is. Similar to how the idea of computer repair programs, do we offer the opportunity for students to get involved in some of those projects? And if we do or don't, is it even allowed?
That's a great one. I don't believe that we have any students involved with these actual projects. Whether or not, if we had a live project, having those students, I think there would be a question. I'd want to talk to Josh in terms of, they've got staff in some cases, not all of them. These are union jobs. Not all of these jobs are union jobs, but some are union jobs. So I'd want to think about what we were doing. If it was a smaller project, that might be the case. So there would be some kind of workplace considerations I'd want to think through very carefully about what was in there. Not saying our students couldn't handle it, and also agreeing with you in terms of skill building.
I thought of just as a skill building.
Fantastic. Absolutely. So I'd want to think through a little bit on how that would work, and I could report back if that was something that we could possibly do. Again, we're bidding these jobs out. We actually are required to pay what's called prevailing wages. And so, and there literally are things called bid protests. So I would just want to be very careful with procurement rules and regs. That's not sounding as that I don't want to do it.
Even if they were shadowing union people, I just think it would be a good opportunity.
I think also what we repair vehicles, we fix buildings, we build roads, and all of these, I think the conversation that I think our DPW and public buildings team is looking forward to having more is with our career and voc ed. Can we do some summer internships and perhaps build a pipeline also to, these are great paying jobs and great jobs. So I think that's what we're also looking forward to doing more.
Yeah. So Barry, just one quick thing to add before my incredibly quick question. The Newton North Carpentry class has actually done a lot of charitable work. They've gone to New Orleans and rebuilt homes. They've essentially gone to disaster areas after the disaster. Families have contributed toward travel costs and living expenses, and the students have gone and spent, a week helping people. So that's absolutely an incredible offshoot of some of the career and technical education at Newton North. A little bit different from the question you asked, but they do look for those opportunities, and I think it's easier in some situations, like working with Habitat for Humanity, where they can go out and do this work. And Liam, you may have more details on that. The last one I remember some of my neighbors doing was a few years ago, but I'm sure it's continued.
They're involved with a lot of projects. I'm told the same thing. It would be good to get a list of these, but there are a lot of different things that they go and get involved with. They're not, again, maybe not major new school building projects, but many smaller little projects to do.
So my very quick question, in contracting costs for the high schools, are we finally done paying for lights?
For the Newton North lights for the athletic fields, yeah. So again, that was actually on. Again, thank you to the city. That was something that the city, took on, and the city's continuing to do work. There's now a lot of work on to be happening at Albemarle Field. But yeah, as far as I know, the lights are paid for and all basically completed.
So we don't have to rent them anymore.
No,
They're not just paid for; they're installed and
going. Yeah,
fantastic.
Yes.
It's a big change from 6 years ago. We have 2 full fields at South that are fully lit. Was not true 6 years ago. North is fully lit. And by the way, with great lights that just aim down, and we're working hard, and we'll have Albemarle, a field lit there, and with synthetic turf.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Yes, Ping.
Okay, might be, I hope it's relevant, but let me just ask through the question. When Steve present the, IT and all that have a Thrive project, a Thrive budget, 700,000. Now I'm looking at your key issues to monitor. Are we supporting our educational value to move forward a thriving project? So if in the ideal world, we're in a thriving community. So any thinking on that? Any thoughts I'd like to share?
Well, yeah, I mean, the needs of a school district, and particularly Newton, they're always going to be there. And you've heard that from transportation. You'll hear that with IT. And I sound like I'm Mr. saying no to all these things. I think Anna had shared a slide, a tale of 5 budgets, and we're getting a solid allocation, and we're also getting a $4.1 million education stabilization account. In total, that's a little more than 5%. I think it's 5.11% if you add the two together. Again, the school committee, as a reminder, is just voting on that appropriation, not the education stabilization account. So when it comes time to a vote, make sure we get this right number, but that education stabilization account is there. So that thriving budget on Ping, is a number that would have to continue to grow even higher than that. And so that would be discussions that we're going to need to continue to have with the city, and they've made a huge investment, a $22 million investment in this education stabilization account. So there are a lot of needs. I know that we've identified a lot of these needs in this budget. We have a lot of FTE coming back into this budget. And I know that there's more. And I know that, Dr. Nolan's, looking at everything, every rock that, that is out there, and nothing is going to be unturned. So we'll bring those to you, and to the extent that they can fit in the budget, it would be there. But certainly similar to the charter maintenance budget, that was a goal. It was a goal of ours, at least, to restore that to an area. And I think that if we have our minds, and if IT is something that is, which I believe is a priority for us, that is something I think that we continue to kind of chip away on and try to bring that budget up. $700,000 is a big amount of money, but is this something that we can do, or can we use some one-time money over time? But ideally, we would bring that number up, because the devices, the equipment, all the things that Stephen talked about are real. And I don't want to, we need to increase that budget over time. It's literally kind of similar to the charter maintenance, where we just had not been funding it that appropriately. So we've got to do that same thing. But I think that there's also student and staffing needs as well that will be competing with that. So it's ultimately going to kind of be a question of trade-offs, and where do we want to end up?
Okay, thank you very much, Liam.
Thank you.
All right, we have one last item on the agenda for tonight, which is an introduction for our Student Opportunities Act plan. And this is something a little new for the committee, but it sounds like it shouldn't have been.
Correct. So the Student Opportunities Act came about shortly before COVID as a means. Actually, former interim superintendent Kathy Smith was integral in the state to advocating for additional funding, predominantly impacting gateway cities to address budget inequities. It's where all of us aspiring women soups were inspired by Kathy Smith and her take no prisoners way of getting at that. That said, since then, and during the pandemic, the SOA process has become different each year. I completed it for my former district. It has not been the same process every year, but it did have a stakeholder engagement requirement that ultimately came to the school committee, where you blessed the fact that the person writing it had reached out to stakeholders and understood what was being proposed. The document that you see before you is a continuation of the last 2 years of what the SOA grant was supposed to fund. The application has looked different every year. This year, there is no requirement for, it's like an essay. It's pretty open-ended. It doesn't really require documentation. It doesn't require test results. It doesn't require any submission at this time. The Department of Education said this year that they would like us to submit documents in keeping with what we have submitted in prior years. And this is the entire state. And they're going to give us technical assistance by way of personalized meetings with us about future applications for SOA. In some districts, this is a lot of money, millions and millions. This has constituted $600,000 in the last couple of budgets for Newton. They have not yet indicated what our SOA amount is for this upcoming year. So we have some guesses about what it could be. We updated some of this document as a central office team, most notably the places where we invested in MTSS services and our panorama data for mental health and social emotional health. We do not have the tools in the system under academic tracking and performance right now to actually give you a more detailed SOA document. And this is something that has come up in my entry planning. And so there's a list there of MCAS data and the targets given to us by the state, which are known by, they're published, they're on the website, and they're based on the last 3 years of MCAS performance. So I know it's weird that you haven't been asked before to bless this. What you are blessing is that you feel confident that I have reached out to the community and understand what its needs are. So I hope that the strength of my entry planning process would counter that. My worry is that we don't have a new strategic plan. So I want this to be aligned with the strategic plan, and I want to be able to report on it in the annual report. We don't have the tools yet in place for me to give you the kind of data that I think you would want to feel like you've blessed this thing that's meaningful and helpful. So we're in this weird spot, and I need your recommendation for it. It is submitted by April 1st. I can ask for an extension if you are truly uncomfortable with what is here. This is what was submitted, similar to the last 2 years, and there has been no negative feedback from the Department of Education. You are tracking what we are doing in district goals and my performance evaluation. And certainly we've been very public with our visits to the public about what we intend to do for improvements. So that is the document, and it has a stakeholder requirement. It also had in the last 2 years this very complicated matrix of how will you braid in ESSER funds and ARPA funds and any other grant money that came from COVID. And I don't see that document here. And I don't know if you and Dr. McCall sat and braided that together from the city side. So let's say it's been a woogie thing here. And what you can expect in the future from SOA, if this continues, I don't know what to expect from the Department of Education. There's new leadership. There's a lot of, changes happening there. We will use our strategic plan that we develop as a community to guide us, and we will align our SOA document with that. So that's the long way around to say I would love you to vote this on our next meeting, but understand that you may have concerns about how granular or not granular it is. I do too. I simply don't have the tools to give you more at this time.
Okay, thank you. So if I can maybe paraphrase what you're saying a little bit, just to make sure I'm clear. This is, this is a document we have to submit to DESE on an annual basis. Let's not confuse it for our plan.
Correct.
This is, and while you would expect there isn't glaring inconsistencies between this and what we're doing as a district, this is not in any way
Opposition.
supplanting our plan.
No. And in fact, last year, it was a plan where you had drop-down boxes of things that the Department of Education thought they're called EPBs, like educational priorities. And so there's less emphasis on that this year, but our team had been working on those and spending in those areas. So we had this whole conversation about, do we scrap the whole thing? Do we not? But then we'd have to scrap it again with our strategic plan. So I just wanted you to be aware of the difficulties there.
Okay, I think I get that. Rajiv?
Nolan, a couple of thoughts. One is nothing in here was surprising.
Good.
Which is good.
Yep.
Right. And it also didn't come across as this is our new strategic plan.
Okay, good.
It seemed like a snapshot of here's where we are, here's where we want to maintain focus or increase focus. So I'm comfortable with the document. I guess my specific question is, do we need to vote on it, or can it just be a submission from you to DESE?
It's a requirement that we have a school committee vote. It's actually a question in that, have you brought this to school committee for a vote?
In which case, I guess we do.
Yes.
All right.
I mean, I guess we could say no, yes, and no. I mean, I guess that could be an answer. It says on page.
I'm guessing that's not the answer DESE's looking for.
That's probably not, yeah. Confirm that you engaged with stakeholder groups on the development of this plan, parents, caregivers, special education and English learner, parent advisory councils, school councils, and educators in your district. And confirm that school committee voted to approve this plan and the date of that vote. No, it would be for your next time on April 1st, and that's the date that Dr. McCall would submit it.
And I would just say, I mean, it does mention like school councils and whatever. I assume we're making that same push out.
So that's the beauty of using your strategic plan to align with this, is that there's a whole workshopping process that would involve with our school councils. I don't believe that this has gone to school councils, but all of the school improvement plans have, and that's what's in here. So it aligns tangentially with that.
Mayor Fuller?
Just want to applaud you for, in such a thoughtful, caring way, pointing out perhaps shortcomings in previous years, acknowledging that you want to do it better in future years, and making it so clear and transparent. I'm very comfortable with voting yes 2 weeks from now.
That would be like 6 days from now, just for the record. Monday. Okay. Other questions? Tamika, I see your hand up.
Thanks, Chris. So yes, ditto to what Mayor Fuller said. I agree that this was a squidgy past practice that we will look to remedy in the future. But along those lines, my question is just, Anna, if you could talk about your ideal process for doing this better. Not the details, because obviously you're going to have to work that with your team, but what would you have liked to have been able to do had you had the time and the available resources to do it?
So if we do our post profile of a graduate, we engage our stakeholders in a strategic planning process. We should have a 5-year plan before us, which will have the sort of big buckets that we want to achieve. And each year we'll engage in a process that will include you. It will include the school councils and the principals in a loop of feedback and revision according to our results that we publish in our annual report and here at our meetings with you. And so lifting just out of our plan, makes the writing of this thing much easier, right? So this is what we said we would be doing. And this now, if the Department of Ed changes its EPBs, if you will, the evidence-based programs that it will allow, we'll have to come back to you and the community and say, so this is what DESE's saying they'll offer money for. What do we want to do? So I mean, I hope it's clear that stakeholder engagement, the process that we've been engaging in is really asking the community all the time, what is on your mind? What are the things that you would like us to address? So for example, our internal math review next year came out of speaking to many, many parents about their concerns about their students' math achievement. My guess is that would land in here next year as a place we would be tracking on.
Thanks. And that was my follow-up question, which was, do you anticipate that by next year we'd be on track to be doing just that? Sounds like yes.
I hope so, unless there's some unusual thing that we can't predict. God help us.
Let's hope not. Thank you.
Okay. Other questions or thoughts? No.
Well, I have to say I haven't reviewed carefully, but looks like this is very significant efforts by DESE to continue the so-called narrowing the achievement gap, to focus on those students who really struggling, for many reasons, social, economic reasons, and so-called marginalized families somewhere saying that. And I think that that's very critical. And I read just one paragraph saying the student growth percentile show the high performing students are making more progress than those students who are already were losing their momentum. They are making less progress. And now there's even more struggling. And that's something always concerning very much, because eventually by high school, those students will be very struggling, and the prospect is very dim for those students if they struggle in high school, and even they graduate from high school with MCAS test, which is a very basic test to pass it. And I think this efforts now, considering the after COVID-19, this is even more critical and fundamental to help those students. And Newton probably in essence might be lucky than some other district, but still we have, if you look at the MCAS test, there are a group, some students who are struggling in the middle school already. And those students, I don't know how much financial support we will receive from DESE, but the idea, the goals are very lofty, and I'll give full support to that ideas.
I also just want to be clear that there is exceptional hard work that is summarized here, and this is not to negate that work. It's just not shaped in the way that we are thinking about how we measure and deploy our resources and the impact of those resources. So we're building our toolkit to be able to track that. I mean, next year we might have our data dashboard to show. We'll have a review of curricula. We'll have a full year of EL under our belt. So there's just a lot more that we'll be able to do.
Yep. Thank you. I think you said what I was kind of envisioning of, next year, this is something that should be able to just effectively be lifted straight from an existing document that's going to say, oh yeah, of course we have a goal in mind, And here's, you know, how we're going to address that goal. These are the metrics we're going to use. This is where we are today. This is where we want to be 3 years from now. This is the plan in place to get there. That's all on a piece of paper and should be very easy.
Should be. Mhm. Yep.
All right. Any other thoughts or questions? Okay, great. I think that wraps up our agenda for this evening and we are adjourned.